Howdy friends, Bernardo Espanol from Nardio.net, and today I have a review for you for Space Marine the board game. I've been super excited about this. I've been looking forward to this game since before it was announced because I was like chomping at the bit for the new GW box game. And when Space Marine the board game was announced, I was just hyped. And you may have seen my coverage talking about like the lead up to this, where it was going to be at, and like the little scant details we were given. And I finally have had a chance to have several playthroughs of the game. I've done a few on live stream, and I've done a few with just me and Jazz. And this is the review. But before we start that, let me just say this is not a channel where I just try to do angry things or negative things. This entire channel is just to share stuff that makes me happy, to share my hobbies and to share our good times playing games or meeting talented people or interviewing really great people. So this isn't meant to be negative. That said, TLDR, unless you want to just buy this game for the minis, separate from the board game experience, I cannot recommend it. It's painfully slow, it's lacking in replay, it feels like a hollow, unplay-tested, unfinished experience, and it honestly pisses me off. But the minis are nice. The board that it comes with is nice. For the most part, the rule book looks nice and it is an improvement-ish over some of the previous rule books before. I mean, it feels really premium. Look how glossy that is. Beautiful pictures. There's a whole bunch of art. They fixed one of my biggest complaints about the previous games, bookshelf games, and actually gave you a proper introduction to the factions, the characters, and the enemies to really get you invested. That's great. But the game sucks. So let's start off with this. Space Marine the board game, to me, is a cash grab by Games Workshop meant to milk the popular IP behind it and piggyback off the very popular Space Marine game, especially the upcoming one we still don't have a release date besides winter, I think, maybe November. So it's kind of weird to me that this was released now instead of along with the game, the video game that this is, based on. But it's also meant to be as an intro experience to the wider 40K universe and the game system. So I feel like that fails it. Now, we played this several times, like I said before. We've done our first few playthroughs on 2 live streams. One of them is still up that we just did recently. And in the middle part of it, I'm going to make a chapter link to it before, or a timestamp you can go to and see our thoughts after we finish playing it once again. But we just didn't like it. It feels incomplete. It doesn't feel good. It's boring. How do I say this? Parts of the book contradict each other. The board game comes with 2 tutorials and 2 missions. I think that's BS because the 2 missions still feel like tutorials, and tutorials in a way kind of feel incomplete. Like they're just supposed to introduce you to concepts, whereas missions are where you put everything together and go. But the missions introduce new concepts in contradicting ways, but they don't feel good. They don't feel well-rounded, fleshed out, or balanced. More importantly, balanced. In this game, the Tyranids have a lot of power here, and poor Titus, for the most part, just gets wrecked over and over and over again. And once you figure out, hey, just shoot him to death, you'll just destroy Titus before anything could happen. And then if Titus, the character, is able to get in, you can almost endlessly spawn more Tyranids to overwhelm him, and it just doesn't feel fun. Howdy, Future Bernard here, jumping in. I wanted to give an example of melee problems. So you're going to see an image on the screen now of Titus being attacked in melee. Now, what you're seeing here is what happened. It's a situation you can easily get into with Titus, where he just gets completely surrounded by the Nids and a Ripper Swarm. Now, Titus, in theory, can cut his way out. He can't shoot because he's in melee. So it's not like he'll get 2 shots and then he'll get to use his chainsword. No, he is locked into melee with all of these characters, these enemies around him, and his sword could do at most 5 damage. But as you can see from the picture, there's more than 5 enemies. And then, as you could also see from the pictures, there are more enemies waiting in. So what can happen, and what often happens in the melee side of things, is you just keep getting swarmed. But what makes things worse is, okay, you'll think, well, eventually I'll kill off all the enemy characters. Well, no, because the Tyranid player can keep bringing in D6 plus 3 Tyranids every time it's their turn to start, so you will end up getting forever swarmed until the game is over after 5 rounds, and you're just screwed because you'll never be able to move because there'll always be more Tyranids coming at you, and you'll always be locked in combat until you either inevitably die through melee or the game ends and you've controlled nothing because the Tyranids are also able to take over the objectives or try to at the same time. When you start off, you're excited because you have, like, let's say you're playing on the Tyranid side. Oh, I have all these minis I get to like hoard with, but you have to move them one by one. And that isn't fun. It's really, really slow. And then you do your shooting, and then you do your charge. And if you're on the Space Marine side, you're just waiting. You're just waiting for the person to move their 20, sometimes 22 like little minis around the board to come and get you. And as a Tyranid player, it just kind of bogs down. It's like, this doesn't feel good. And you get bored and frustrated having to move one by one. It gets old. And then comes shooting phase. You're given 6 dice with this game, but you have to sometimes shoot 20 times. So you're not only just rolling dice and trying to do and like keep count, but you're also having to re-roll the same few dice over and over again. It's stupid. Why didn't they just include the 20 dice? I don't understand. Dice are cheap. So if you have spare dice to mix in, go ahead. Otherwise, it's just a slow experience. And for the Space Marine player, it's boring and it doesn't feel like this was thought out. I mean, it gives you the feeling of being overwhelmed, but at the same time, it's just like you have a pathetic move. You get locked into combat where you can no longer move anymore when even one Tyranid is next to you in engagement, and you'll quickly find that you're going to get swarmed. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the point of the game, but you kind of lose power over what you can do. It'd be nice if you can like break out of combat and go to one objective to the next, but no, you're lucky if you make it to the second objective. Meanwhile, this game has multiple objectives to get to and control, but you're going to be locked in, and that's it. You're locked in until you die, and you're most of the time going to die. It's not fun. It's really not fun. I don't know how to say. There's no replay unless you and your partners homebrew like what you do next, mixing up the concepts that you've learned from the 2 different missions and the 2 tutorials, because the 2 missions aren't fun. The 2 missions aren't balanced. The 2 missions are boring, and the 2 missions are just 2 missions. I don't understand this. Like, if this was released several years ago, and I'm talking before a lot of their other bookshelf games were released, this would still be a bad game. This would still be a very bad, boring, hollow game. But having it being released after Labyrinth of the Necrons, after Blitz Bowl, after even Fire Team, there's no excuse for this game having such little replay, so few missions, lacking the expandability this game screams for. It makes no sense that this is the newest game, whereas Fire Team had a whole slew of missions to play through. Granted, a bunch of those weren't balanced, but they had its own issues, but there was replay there, especially if you factored in the other factions you could bring into the game. Here, you just have the 2 starting forces, and what? How's this so bass-backwards? With Blitz Bowl, you have two sides of the board. You have all these expansion teams, and there's opportunities to come back and replay this in different ways. And it's not like the 40K universe is lacking. They can make it where they could have made rules where you could have brought in warriors, where you could have brought in some other factions, just like they did for Fire Team, and it would work. Heck, even in the artwork for the book, you see Titus fighting not only the Termagants, but like a warrior in there. And adding something new and new scenarios would have really helped out, but they didn't. And I don't understand why. And it honestly pisses me off because this feels like such a lackluster experience. And it feels like Games Workshop management saw that this game was in development. I feel like this game was rushed out maybe 6 months too early, at least, because the video game isn't even out yet that goes with this. So the mental divide over this is weird. I don't know. Like I feel like you want this released when people are already hyped for the game, or or like they've finished beating the video game, or they know the video game is out there, but they see this like, oh, let me try the board game before I try the video game, so I can get like a similar experience. And no, it comes out months ahead. I don't know. It feels like they released this early, decided, hey, you know what? Let's rip out all the pages that have the rest of the tutorials, the rest of the missions, and then we'll throw in random ads for collecting the Space Marines and the Tyranids. And some of these are somewhat useful, like, good next steps for the player, like getting the paint set, showing you how to paint and where to paint. I think this really would have done well with the QR code that you can scan with your phone, and it would have taken you directly to the YouTube channel showing you how to paint Titus, how to paint the Termagants, but that's lacking here. But at least there's a guide. It mentions the Librarian and Terminator armor, it mentions the Combat Patrol, but it doesn't tell you what they are and why as far as gameplay goes. Like, they're pointing out the Librarian because he was a recent release figure, but it's not like you can use them as an expansion in this game. They should have. They really should have. And it's maddening that they didn't, because again, having the librarian back you up would have librarian back you up would have been really useful in this, or like explaining why you want to try Combat Patrol, how to get into it. They do the same thing with the Tyranid side with the Barbagants and their Combat Patrol, and then take your game to the next step. It shows you the $100 starter set and a $210 starter set, but doesn't explain to you why you'd want to. What's going to be the difference gameplay wise to get you to want to jump into these things? It's weird, and it feels like a huge misstep and a waste of time. I just don't understand this. And then we get to another problem with the game: the data sheets. Usually in these bookshelf games, the player stat cards that you need to play are given to you in separate cards that you and the other player can have in front of you. Except this time, it's in the back of the frickin' book. So you got to either take a picture with your cell phone or write things down or photocopy this, but it's just unwieldy. And during our first playthroughs, we just kind of forgot a few things because we just forgot to keep checking that. We thought we had it, we didn't. Our second, third, and fourth playthroughs of this, we had this photocopied and we were better able to understand what our units can do, but even still, with a bad game, it didn't help too much. Oh, God. But it feels like management decided to just rip out a lot of the content here. Maybe it just wasn't done in time, and they just put some pretty pictures in and just went with it with the ads. I feel like if you ripped out these 2-page spreads, got rid of the ads for the Librarian and the Combat Patrols, and just put like more missions in, better rounded missions in, expansions in, that would have made this game better. Going back to my previous review of Fireteam, I didn't think the base game of Fireteam was very good. I didn't think it was balanced, and it didn't really feel fun as is. But the expansion cards that came with it allowed me to play with different factions, save the game. And as you can tell, if you've watched my channel, we've played a lot of games of Fireteam since then. Most of the time, we don't really use the starter factions against each other. We do the other factions. Here, it would have really helped if there were different game modes or different factions, but it's not there. And it's frustrating because, again, you see the potential here that this could have led into different steps. And even more so when you look at this is a beautiful game board. This is an absolute beautiful game board. Yes, it feels weird to call a game board beautiful, but let's unfurl this real quick. All right, so you look at this game board, and some of the modes are Titus starts here, and you have these objective parts to get to. But that's it. It doesn't do anything else. There's like one game mode, like 2 game modes on this side. The other side's a tutorial, and that's frustrating because you could have seen almost like a D similar like campaign. Maybe you come out from the elevator over here. You have to get to the control panel to be able to shut off these 2 things, and then you have to get back out or something like that. And then these are spawn points for the Tyranids. It could be like they've done stuff like that in other games like Fireteam. but they don't. And it's up to the player to make up, but it doesn't even tell you, here are some ideas for different modes you can do. It just gives you these two sides of the board and then lets you go and then like go at it. And here's this other board with like, there are plenty of, how do I say this, opportunities to have Games Workshop have made game things to do here, but they didn't. And it's frustrating. I don't know. I'm just really unhappy with what I got versus what I paid for, because one of our viewers, I believe Brad, said it best, where it feels like Games Workshop just wanted to sell models without any thought as to the game that goes alongside them. So this was just rushed out, and it feels that way. I can't recommend this as a game to people who are looking for a board game night. I can't recommend this as a game to solo players. I can't recommend this as an intro experience to the 40K universe, because it's just not fun. There's points in the parts of the rule book that contradict each other and make things confusing. Things aren't spelled out as well as they could have been, and I don't know. It's just, the replay is just not there. The only way I could recommend Space Marine the board game is if you don't give a damn about the board game and you just want the minis. And if you're already into the cult that is Games Workshop prices, and you are a card-carrying member who accept the price of things, then yeah, this is a fantastic bargain, because the Titus miniature alone, I am very sure, is going to go for more than the board game. You can get this at Target now for about $40. I'm sure Titus is going to be like $42 to $45. The Termagants alone are going to be about $40. So already, this is just a steal if you want the minis. And the minis are beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, and they're very easy to assemble. Having come from the last few years of Necrons having to build and all these, these Necron-based games, I hated assembling them. The Termagants were a dream to assemble. They looked like they could be a nightmare to paint, but they were a dream to assemble. And same with Titus. He was a very easy to assemble miniature, and I'm very excited to dive in and paint them. But I don't see myself ever really coming back to this game or wanting to play it. That's a $40 investment for the minis and for this review, but as playing the base game, no, it's not good. It's not good. It's not worth my time or your time. Now, there are ways I think you can homebrew this game. You can come up with your own scenarios, and we have ideas. We talked about them on streams. Some of our wonderful community threw some ideas as well, like how this can be fixed and improved. And I look forward to seeing what the board game community does to create replayability here, to create expansions, to make the game better. But that isn't our job. We're paying for a finished product. We're not paying to like have an incomplete experience. This is Games Workshop's fail. And I'm sure they're going to be the YouTube reviewers who are going to look at this, tell you it's amazing, and then never touch it again. But that ain't what we do here. I think the biggest sign of how bad of a game this was for me is, as I was doing our second live stream, to do the live stream, to make it interesting, even for myself and I feel like for my viewers, I also said there's a Blitz Bowl game as well. And the longer Jazz and I played the game, Space Marine board game, the more and more I just wanted to end it already so I could hurry up and play Blitzball. And that's a big sign if it just can't even keep my attention. And the more I played through it on the stream, the more I just found more and more fails with it. And there's a lot of problems with this game. And it honestly just kind of makes me sad. So that's it. That's my review. Don't buy it unless you just want the minis to paint, or you are going to use it possibly as a way to make up games with friends and family, because then you get, like, again, you get two factions per se. You get a beautiful game board with plenty of art on here that could be used for like creating your own experiences, and then if you have anything else you could use as terrain, this could be the start of something for some game dev who looks at this, indie game dev who looks at this and is like, maybe this could be a good starting point for me to play test my ideas. Go ahead. I say, jump into it. If you're looking for something for date night, if you're looking for something to play alone, there are better options out there. I recommend Labyrinth of the Space Marine Adventures, Labyrinth of the Necrons. You can get it for about $24 on Amazon right now. It's an older game. It only comes with, I believe, 5 or so Space Marine minis, but they all look very different. and it's you versus a horde of tokens that represent Necrons. It has a lot of replay. It has expansions, but unfortunately it's hard to find those expansions because they only made a limited quantity, and the only people who seem to have it now are evil, soulless, horrible scalpers. But the base game as is good enough for solo play, it's good enough for date night, and I enjoy Space Marine Adventure Labyrinth of Necrons. I do not enjoy Space Marine the board game, and I do not recommend this. So there's my review. If you like it, I hope you do. If you don't, please be nice about it in the comments. But please comment, like. If you're really awesome, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if you really, really appreciate what we do, please support us on Patreon. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.